Today, we're exploring a powerful and important speech in one of the most famous plays in the history of literature and drama, Hamlet.
Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fust in us unused. Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered hath but one part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward, I do not know why yet I live to say this thing's to do.
Now, whether or not you've read this play, heard this play, seen this play, or anything, I promise you'll gain insights about life, human nature, inaction, taking action, and I'll provide all the context that you need of what's going on in the story so you can walk away with this video understanding something critical about this very famous character, Hamlet, make Shakespeare a little bit less intimidating, because I know for me, he could be very intimidating. So I'm going to help you understand some things about him that will hopefully help you appreciate and enjoy Shakespeare, and in the future, other Shakespeare performances, as well as just learn something about this play and human life and human experience. We're also going to watch 2 remarkable performances of one single speech. So we're going to be just diving into a single speech, which happens in Act 4, sometimes Scene 2 or 1, sometimes Scene 4, depending on what script you might find, which I call the What is a Man speech, but if you look it up, it's often identified as how all occasions do inform against me. Oh, poor me, how everything's against me. And we're going to talk about this, the character, and so much more. So stick around, check out this video, turn on your TV and just listen in the background. And I know by the end of this, you will have gained some really profound insights about life, Shakespeare, and human experience. But first, let me catch you up quickly on what's going on in the story. This happens toward the end of the story. So you've heard the name Hamlet. He's the Prince of Denmark. His father, old King Hamlet, has recently died under suspicious circumstances, but Hamlet, young Hamlet, Prince Hamlet, is convinced that his father was murdered. And he finds out some evidence that he was in fact murdered. Not only murdered, but murdered by the now standing king, Claudius, who happens to be the brother of the old King Hamlet, thus the father of Prince Hamlet. So it's complicated. Moreover, he's married to Hamlet's mother, Gertrude. Moreover, to make things even worse in a sense, they only waited barely 2 months to be married. Hamlet was at school, at university. He comes home, they're getting married. That's when we first meet Hamlet in the play. The 4 acts before where we're going to read our speech, Hamlet has been struggling, contemplating, discussing, thinking through revenge. This is a revenge play, first and foremost. Revenge dominates the play, but not just revenge in a Viking style. So this story, Hamlet, actually comes from an ancient or an old Norse Viking story of the story of Amleth, A-M-L-E-T-H, written from somebody by the name we call Saxo Grammaticus. And in that story, some similar things happen, but it's really just about Amleth being exiled from his uncle, coming back, feigning madness so they don't just kill him, and then he gets revenge by killing everybody, especially his uncle. And that's a Viking. There's not a lot of contemplation. There's not a lot of debate. There's not a lot of religious Protestant theorizing and thinking about should I or shouldn't I kill this man? Is it right to live? Should I live or should I die? Like, those things aren't relevant in the original. Shakespeare really adds a lot to this story. Before our scene, in the kind of climactic scene, which happens in Act 3, Hamlet is talking to his mother. He sees the ghost of his father. This is the second time he has seen his father's ghost, who's telling him to go and seek revenge which is one of the reasons why Hamlet's trying to do this. And in this scene between Gertrude, the mother, and Prince Hamlet, there is a man hiding behind a tapestry, a curtain. When Hamlet realizes this, he stabs through the curtain, thinking that it's his uncle spying on him, but it actually ends up being Polonius, who is an advisor to the king. Not only is he an advisor to the king, he is the father of Hamlet's lover, Ophelia. So again, this play is so complicated, we can't get into everything, but it's so worth just exploring. You could watch multiple movies, and we'll talk about this as we go. Read it for yourself, but it's so interesting and intriguing. So the killing of Polonius in Act 3 is a climactic event. It causes King Claudius to essentially have no other choice but to send away Hamlet. So he sends Hamlet. Secretly, King Claudius is trying to find a way to legitimately kill Hamlet. He can't just outright kill the Prince of Denmark. So he sends him off to England with some instructions that he will likely be killed because of. And in fact, 2 people are killed, and it's just that Hamlet was able to finagle things so it wasn't him. It was actually 2 of his friends, but they weren't very good friends because they were spying on him. Again, it's crazy, a lot going on. Now, as Hamlet is departing Denmark, there is a Norwegian army. Now, if you look at a map, there is this army by Fortinbras, who is the now king or the leader of Norway. He's coming to Denmark in order to take back some of what old King Hamlet, the old king of Denmark, had fought and beaten back some of the Norwegian army before Fortinbras. And so he'd won some land. And now Fortinbras is trying to come back and take some land back from him, back from Denmark, essentially. Before Fortinbras actually comes all the way to Denmark, he is actually going to take his army to recover another patch of land that was lost by his father, which is basically meaningless, worthless, not very much. It's just not worth much. It's just about the honor of the whole thing. Okay, so that's the essential story of what's going on in broad strokes. Okay, now we're going to get into the actual speech. And then we'll talk a little bit about the meaning of the speech, what it says about the character of Hamlet, and then we'll watch a few versions of the speech done beautifully, a lot better than I could do, by some of the best actors, Shakespearean actors of our era. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the speech as well. You'll get many chances to hear the speech performed not only differently, but with slightly different words. So this first speech is one that I put together that's a little bit more modernized. That way you can understand the words or the meaning of the words a little bit more. And then as we move on to a little bit more and more challenging text, the words you may not know as well, like fussed, or there's a sense, let me actually read just one little line to give you an example of the somewhat challenging of this. This comes from a more traditional version. This is from the Norton Shakespeare. What is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? Now, I bet you understood what that meant to some degree, but what does he mean by if his chief good and market? So I have that line, what is a man if his chief good and value of his time is but to sleep and feed? Very simple, similar, but again, I think by just changing it to his chief good and value, it becomes a little clearer exactly what he's meaning. That's what he means by market. So again, we're going to read this a couple times. We're going to talk about life a little bit. We're going to talk about the meaning of these things and what you can learn as a human being, whether you have ever read Hamlet or not. So let's get into this. I'm not going to really act this out much because I'm not much of an actor. All right. So this is Hamlet speaking. He's speaking to himself, a soliloquy, his internal thoughts, but he has seen Fortinbras's army. He has learned that they are going to fight for a patch of land based on some honor because Fortinbras's father lost that land. That's what's going on for Hamlet in action. Now here's his thoughts. How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge. What is a man if his chief good and value of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast, no more. Sure, he hath made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to rot in us unused. Now, whether it be beastly oblivion, or some cowardly hesitation of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered has but one part wisdom, and ever 3 parts coward. I do not know why yet I live to say the things to do, since I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. Examples blunt as earth exhort me. Witness this army of such mass and charge, led by a delicate and tender prince, whose spirit with ambition divine puffed mocks the unseen outcome, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare, even for an eggshell. Rightly to be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw, when honour's at the stake. How stand I, then, that have a father killed, a mother stained, excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, while to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men, that for a fantasy and trick of fame go to their graves like beds, fight for a plot, whereon the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough, and enough space to hide the slain. Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody, or be nothing worth. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. And then, like I said, we'll watch the Branaugh version so you could see a beautiful, masterful way of doing it. Branaugh is my favorite example of this. He's my favorite Hamlet, and I've seen 5 or 6. I also like the Mel Gibson one. There's others that I'm still going to watch. But one of the joys of reading Shakespeare is seeing all the different iterations and comparing them in your own mind with how you think about it. So the opening here is how all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge. So he's saying something about his dull revenge. He's not revenged his father. He's been given an edict by the ghost of old Hamlet, his father, to get revenge by killing his uncle. And he hasn't done it despite having the opportunity. Why hasn't he done it? Because he's worried that he will send King Claudius, his uncle, to heaven rather than hell, because the last time he got an opportunity to kill him, he was confessing, and if you confess in Protestant Christian religion, you go straight to heaven. And so he's like, I can't kill this guy now. And maybe that's not the real, maybe that's just a rationalization. We don't know. That's what he tells himself. But there's chances that he has, and he doesn't take it. He still has not just killed his uncle, the king of Denmark, someone he disdains, and he knows now, he now has evidence because he overheard him that he did actually kill his father. So now he's seeing this Fortinbras prince who's like him. He's a prince, and the prince is taking action and taking back what his father lost, and he's gonna honor his father. Whereas Hamlet, he's a university thinker, he's an intellectual. He's like, I don't know what to do. Okay. Then he says, what is a man if his chief good and value of his time be but to sleep and feed? Now that is an important thought. Think about that for a moment. What is a man? How do you think about what it means to be a man? And I don't mean necessarily just manliness, although that's part of it, but what humans is the chief value, the chief good and value is simply to sleep and feed. I think that many of us do live that way, where we're basically just sleeping and feeding, and that's about it. A beast, no more, he says. So if you are the type that sleeps and feeds only, then you are a beast and no more than a beast. Sure, he that made us, God, with such large discourse, that's the ability to think and reason, looking before and after, so the ability to see like a time span, to see the future, to think about the past, right? To look before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to rot in us unused. So don't let the fire burn out of you. The gift of fire is the gift of the mind. It's the gift of thinking, of reasoning, of considering, of deliberating. That is a gift, and it's a godlike gift. Now, whether it be beastly oblivion, so that's how beasts live, they're oblivious, they're not thinking beings. Even if they're aware, they're not actually able to contemplate their own existence, life after death and things of that nature. So now, whether it be beastly oblivion or some cowardly hesitation of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered 4 has but 1 part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward. Now, I love that line. If you're listening to this, if you're reading anything I write, if you're reading what other people write, I would be willing to bet that you are someone who leans a little bit more toward being an intellectual. You're a little bit of an intellectual. I think that's a wonderful thing to be an intellectual. But this idea of 1 part wisdom, 3 parts coward, I think is very accurate for most intellectuals that I've ever met, including ones I really admire, is that they're mostly cowards. They're not willing to really put their neck out there. They're not really willing to act appropriately. But they will think precisely the head of a needle, how many angels can dance on the head of a needle. Even if they're atheists, I've seen that kind of thinking in a lot of intellectuals, a lot of intellectual people. So I think Hamlet is coming to that realization. He was that kind of thinker. He would think about things and have these long soliloquies and debates within his own mind. And he realizes Fortinbras, it doesn't do that. He just goes out and acts. He does stuff. And we have to admire the doing of things, the taking of actions, not the let's have 10 hours of discussions about what to do and how to think about this issue. No. Go act, do something. If you just think too precisely on any particular event, you could do that infinitely, and we've all had that infinite regress. If that's the case, if you're debating, should I ask the girl out or not ask the girl out, and you're thinking about it thousands of times, or what kind of career should I go after? Should I start this business? And you think about it so precisely that you are quartered 1 part wisdom, there's good in what you're saying, and there's 3 parts coward. I do not know, I'm going to continue with the speech. I do not know why yet I live to say this things to do. There's stuff to do here. And he says, since I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. I'm a young, ambitious, able man. And I think that's important to the characterization. We'll get to that when we are listening and watching the performances by Branaugh and Andrew Scott. That he has strength and will and means to do it. He's the Prince of Denmark, for God's sakes. Examples, blunt as earth, exhort me. So he sees examples of taking action versus just regressing in his mind and just completely going over and over again in his mind. Witness this army. So he's convincing himself here. Witness this. Look at this. It's an army, thousands of men of such mass and charge, led by a delicate and tender prince, which I think is just his way of saying a young prince like myself, whose spirit with ambition divine puffed mocks the unseen outcome. He doesn't know how things are going to happen either. The unseen outcome, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare, even for an eggshell. It's just for an eggshell. We have established that the plot of land that he's fighting for is merely because his father lost it. And that's it. It's not even, they say it's not worth 5 ducats. I don't know how much that is, but a small amount of money to, I wouldn't buy it for that. It's been said right before this. So it's an eggshell. Think about what an eggshell is. It's a great little metaphor. It's not, it doesn't even have the yolk in it anymore. It's just we don't know. It's just the shell itself, which we can't really do too much with. Rightly to be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honor's at stake. Okay, so that's an interesting one. And he's, making arguments about fighting for honor. And that even if it's just a straw's worth of honor, someone has attacked your honor, you should take some action. He's seeing this example from this man, Fortinbras. Fortinbras is fighting for a straw, nothing but an eggshell. And then Hamlet goes on, how stand I then, that have a father killed, a mother stained? So he thinks his mother stained because she has remarried 2 months later to the murderer. A little bit of stain there. Excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, while to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men, that for a fantasy and trick of fame go to their graves, like beds. Fight for a plot whereon the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough and enough space to hide the slain. Now that's an interest. Think about what he's saying there. So the land is so small that the men who might die over it couldn't fit in the graveyard. That's how, and yet they're willing to go to their deaths to fight for this, for the straw, because their honor is at stake. They're taking action. They're not debating whether it's the right thing. Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth. So now he's ready for action. If you read or watch other performances of this, you'll see Hamlet is just a man who's torn by different ways of not taking action, but of thinking about what he should do in this situation. Okay, so now we're going to watch the Branaugh version of this, which is my favorite, and then we'll watch the Andrew Scott afterwards.
I'll be with you straight. Go a little before. How all occasions do inform against me and spurn my dull revenge. What is a man? If his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed, a beast, no more. Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and God-like reason to fust in us unused. Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered hath but one part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward, I do not know why yet I live to say this thing's to do, sith I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. Examples gross as earth exhort me. Witness this army of such mass and charge, led by a delicate and tender prince, whose spirit with divine ambition puffed, makes mouths at the invisible event, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare, even for an eggshell. Rightly to be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honor's at the stake. How stand I then that have a father killed, a mother stained, excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, whilst to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men that for a fantasy and trick of fame go to their graves like beds, fight for a plot whereon the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough and continent to hide the slain. Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody, or be nothing worth.
Woo! If you watch that movie, it's a 4-hour movie. He tries to do the whole script, which most people who put on Hamlet do, or any Shakespeare play, they usually don't do the whole script. But I think Branaugh really proves, nut up, Shakespeareans, do the whole thing. We can figure it out. We can enjoy it. But it's on us as the audience to really, do a little bit of work. That's the difference between, I think, Shakespeare and like a lot of the modern movies, which I love. But you don't have to do as much work with those. They do a lot of the work for you. With Shakespeare, you have to do some of the work. But with these movies, with cinematography, with music, with the amazing acting. I mean, Kenneth is my favorite by far. You see so much of what the value of Shakespeare is and why so many people over hundreds of years have fallen in love with Shakespeare. Now, I just want to point out something about Kenneth Branagh's, his particular way of doing the speech, and then we'll watch Andrew Scott's performance and compare them. So I think if you pay attention, he's very powerful. He comes to a powerful conviction, and you could feel it building. It's like a speech you might give to an actual army. His Hamlet overall, I think, is robust, heroic. He's frustrated, and he has a lot of the brooding nature, particularly in the early part of the play. But Branaugh really emphasizes Hamlet's strength and determination, the way he's determined. And that's really something that a lot of Hamlet actors do not do, in my experience. They really seem to play up the broodiness, the indecisive nature of him. There's a long hundreds of years of traditions of doing where he's just like this kind of weakling, brooding university student, which he is. But I think I really like Branaugh's. There's a robustness and a strength to him. He's just has inner conflicts and he's trying to figure them out. So I think of this as a very vigorous hero. He's full of virility. You could feel the power in him. Notice how if you watched it again, he doesn't even move really. His fist comes up just a little bit, but he's not like pacing. He's not thinking, and we'll see some different ways of looking at this now. Let me pull up the next one. This is Andrew Scott. He played Moriarty in Sherlock. He played the priest in Fleabag. A great actor, someone I really like, and we'll see his view, and you'll see how different they are. By the way, just note that of the minimum of this.
I greet the Danish king, King Claudius. Tell him that by his license, Fortinbras claims the conveyance of the promised march over his kingdom. You know the rendezvous. If that his majesty would aught with us, we shall express our duty in his eye, and let him know so.
Whose soldiers are these?
They are of Norway, sir.
How purposed?
Against some part of Poland.
Who commands them?
The nephew to old Norway, Fortinbras.
Go they against the main of Poland or by some frontier?
Truly, to speak, and with no addition, they go to gain a little patch of ground that hath in it no more profit but the name. To pay 5 ducats. 5, I would not farm it.
Why then they never will defend it?
Yeah, it is already garrisoned.
2,000 souls and 20,000 ducats will not debate the question of this straw. Thank you, sir.
So that's, of course, some of the setup I was talking about.
God be with you, sir.
Wilt please you go, my lord?
I'll be with you straight. How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge. What is a man if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast. No more. Sure, he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason to fasten us unused. Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered hath but 1 part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward. I do not know. Why, yet I live to say this thing's to do, since I have cause and will and strength and means to do it. Examples gross as earth exhort me. Witness this army of such mass and charge. led by a delicate and tender prince, whose spirit with divine ambition puffed makes mouths at the invisible event, exposing what is mortal and unsure to all that fortune, death, and danger dare, even for an eggshell, rightly. To be great is not to stir without great argument, but greatly to find quarrel in a straw when honour's at the stake. How stand I then that have a father killed, a mother stained, excitements of my reason and my blood, and let all sleep, while to my shame I see the imminent death of 20,000 men who, for a fantasy and trick of fame, go to their graves like beds, fight for a plot wherein the numbers cannot try the cause, which is not tomb enough and continent to hide the slain. Oh, from this time forth, my thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth!
I want to focus on one little snippet here.
Whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered hath but one part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward.
Notice this. Long... What's he doing?
I do not know.
He doesn't know. So, in what we just saw with Andrew Scott, my point here is that when he says, I don't know, I do not know, that's the one time that I personally believe him. I believe him that he doesn't know. Now, look at how the difference is in this sequence here.
Now, whether it be bestial oblivion or some craven scruple of thinking too precisely on the event,
Do you hear this disdain on thinking here?
full of thinking
Thinking.
too precisely on the event, a thought which quartered hath but 1 part wisdom and ever 3 parts coward, I do not know why yet I live to say this thing's to do.
So we won't go through the whole thing again, of course, but I just wanted you to kind of hear a tiny difference, and I want you to compare them and watch both versions and explore them. That's part of the joy of Shakespeare and these great works of literature. But just notice the vast difference. I mean, hopefully you saw there's just such a difference. Now, I think you can sense that my preference is the Kenneth one. I think I've already mentioned that. But Andrew Scott does a masterful job. And the way that he does his performance, I think, my evaluation, is he is really emphasizing the uncertainty. He's very manic. He's like an intellectual who's been thrust into this situation and doesn't really know what to do. And there is something about the way Andrew Scott performs in general, in my opinion, from what I've seen of him, where he really seems to have this, like there's something chaotic in him. I think this is why he was selected as Moriarty in Sherlock. If you saw the Benedict Cumberbatch TV series of Sherlock, where he plays Moriarty. Moriarty is the nemesis of Sherlock. He's the doppelganger of Sherlock, but the evil genius on the other side of the, using his reason for different things. And he comes across as just so insane, where he's like calm, cool, collected, reasonable, chatting, and then all of a sudden he makes these weird things, and he comes and screams, and it's like it comes out of nowhere. And you get that with this Hamlet, which I think can play as a very interesting perspective on Hamlet. I don't think it's a correct version of what's in the script, in my opinion. I think Hamlet is somebody who has ambition. I think he has ambition. I think he wants to be king. I think he just, also is coming at it from a different, from a not certain how to act in this new world where he has these Christian ideals, but he's confronted with these ancient ways of doing things. And that's the role of the ghost. The ghost serves as a dual purpose, in a sense, where it's the old Norse Viking telling you how to act. Get your damn axe and cut off his head. That's what you do. That's it. What do you have to think about? The father in the ghost comes back fully armored, right? And that's done on purpose. Other people see him, by the way. That's an important part of the ghost, is it's not merely Hamlet, because if it was, then we would think, well, maybe he's crazy like Macbeth, who sees the ghost, but nobody else sees the ghost. Hamlet is informed of the ghost by his friends, including Horatio, who's a philosopher. And he's like, there is a ghost. I see this dang thing. But on the one hand, it is this ghost that's telling him with this, like this old Norse Viking. He's a Beowulf. He's this taking action. I don't think about things. I just take action. But he's also a ghost in a kind of purgatory, which is a Christian Protestant worldview. Hamlet himself is now contemplating, well, if I do this thing, am I going to go to hell? Is he going to go to hell? Am I going to go to heaven? What's going to happen next? To be or not to be is really a situation of, should I, end my life or not end my life? I don't know what to do. It's a really complicated, set of circumstances that he finds himself in. But I think his character overall is actually very much ambitious, very much strong, powerful, and capable on some level. And but he's just very caught in between these two forces, trying to figure out how to behave and act. And I think Branaugh really captures that part of it, especially in this speech, but in really the whole performance. Many of us have felt what Hamlet feels on some level, especially if you're listening to this video. You're probably a thinker. You're probably someone who contemplates, who debates in your mind, who goes back and forth, who gets lots of different advice. Maybe you think too precisely. I personally am pro thinking. I'm still pro thinking. I think it's very valuable and important to consider all different elements and to have a thoughtful plan of action. But a thinker should be someone who thinks in terms of action. What kinds of actions should I take and how? I think what happens with Hamlet here is he is taken aback by these two different ways of going about life, the man of action and the man of thought. And he doesn't quite do things correctly because he's too enamored with both sides. So I do not think that Fortinbras is a great model to live on, where you actually are going to have thousands of people die for a patch of land that nobody cares about. But it is an important and great concrete example of the value of thinking, of taking action, of the value of taking actual action. And it's something that actually inspires Hamlet to start taking the action. Now, if you want to find out what happens next in the story, I recommend you go watch this movie by Kenneth Branagh. It's a long one. I put the subtitles on because even though I read the stuff and study it, I still find it difficult. So you will too. But when I have the subtitles, I can look down and see what he's saying, and it makes a lot more sense. I like to get a synopsis of the whole story ahead of time. So there's lots of YouTube videos that have a full synopsis. I'm not going to do that because there's other YouTube videos that do it a lot better than mine. So just, go watch some of those, get a full 5-act synopsis of the beginning, middle, and end, and then go watch 1 or 2 movies. Go read the script with your friends. You can go to troubadour.studio. I'll actually leave a link in the description where you can buy my modern version for just a couple bucks on Gumroad, I think is where I put it right now. And just, read through it with some friends, talk about it. I think there's a lot more you can learn from it than simply your parents or your teachers told you had to read it. There's a lot about life, about taking action, about having these kinds of conflicts in your mind and in your soul. And, whether you're religious, whether you're atheist, wherever you fall in any of these spectrums, you can really think about them and learn from them. In life, just like Hamlet, we often find ourselves hesitating, thinking too precisely, delaying action. But Hamlet's reflections teach us something invaluable. Clarity can arise from recognizing our own hesitation. Ultimately, life demands courage. That's what we can learn from some of these great figures in literature, is that not only does it require courage, but this is what it looks like to take some action. When your moment of action arrives, seize it boldly with purpose and conviction. After all, as Hamlet himself concludes, from now on, let our thoughts lead to meaningful action, or else indeed let them be nothing worth at all. Thank you for watching another episode of Troubadour. I hope you will go read something great, go listen to something great, go watch something great. Come over to troubadour.studio, and I'll see you next time.